English councils are pay private landlords millions in incentives to house homeless families. I'm going to read into this exclusive from The Guardian, you guys. So it says that the data gathered by Generation Rent shows 37 councils spend £31 million in 2024-2025 in one-off payments to individual landlords. So essentially, and we'll look into the data in a moment, guys. But essentially, with the situation around our councils, with the lack of housing, and we know that they're struggling with their budgets as it is, they are obviously they feel that they're compelled to go to private landlords to obviously throw money at them to say, please take these people in, because we have targets we need to achieve. We need to get these people off our streets. And so a lot of council money, a lot of funding, I mean, £31 million is a huge amount of money there. It does feel... a part of me feels like it is such a waste of money. We should not be having to throw money at private landlords. But at the same time, it's like, well, we don't want people being left on the streets. We need to try and help people get back on their feet as much as we possibly can. So it's a catch-22 situation for many councils in this situation. So what do you honestly do? And the problem is that we have a lot of houses, too many houses now owned by private landlords, by very wealthy individuals now. The housing market is not very good right now. Yes, there has been I believe there's been a reduction in house prices recently in some parts, which is a good sign, but still, we just don't have enough homes. And not only that, it's affordable homes as well. And councils need to have more council homes. That would really help the situation a lot as well. But unfortunately, we keep talking about wanting more homes. The reality is it takes time to build the homes, and the problem is that people in this country are just really, really impatient. But I'm not sure what the solution is. But it is very frustrating when we know councils are already struggling. The fact that they have to pay private landlords just to incentivize is very, very concerning indeed. So councils across England are increasingly spending millions of pounds a year in incentivising payments to private landlords to persuade them to house homeless families, with campaigners describing it as a senseless waste of public money. So data gathered by the campaign group Generation Rent via a Freedom of Information request shows that 37 councils spent more than £31 million on one-off cash payments to private landlords on 10,792 occasions in 2024-2025. The data from 32 London councils and the 10 councils outside the capital with the biggest statutory homelessness issue show cash-strapped local authorities are increasingly using these payments to encourage landlords to house families who are homeless or are facing eviction. So this is sourced from Generation Rent, using data from the Freedom of Information request here. So it says here, incentivised payments paid to private landlords in London increased from more than £24 million in 2024-2025. There's total payments in each borough by £1 million there. And you can see from 1 to 2 million and above 3 million there. And you can see Enfield with the highest there, more than 2.5 million there in millions there, which is absolutely insane. Quite a huge amount, over $1 million there as well. Ealing over 2 million, Newington, Lewisham, there, Barnet, Brent, Haringey. You can see Greenwich. This is a lot. That's a lot. Hammersmith and Fulham. That's a lot of London boroughs there. Oh, that's because it is London, you dumbass. Yeah, it's huge amounts of money being spent. And the thing is, in London in particular, obviously, homes and rent is just sky high. It's really, really high, and compared to outside the capital as well. But unfortunately, this is where all the money is. All the money is here in the capital as well. So yeah, very, very bad here. In terms of lowest here, who's the lowest here? Croydon looks like one of the lowest there from the looks of it. But still, some are still paying. Some are paying just less than $1 million. Waltham Forest there looks like pretty low. Bromley pretty low. So there are some which are not are at the lowest there, but still, it's like Enfield. £2.5 million of their money is being spent incentivising landlords to take people in. So in London, the amount being spent by councils on incentives to private landlords has increased by 54% since 2018. 54%, yeah? So that was in the run-up to the COVID pandemic and still after it, guys. The last time data was collected. So Ben Twomey, the chief executive at Generation Rent, said the soaring cost of renting and the government's decision to freeze the local housing allowance has put councils across the country in a near impossible position. In a desperate bid to avoid placing people in temporary accommodation, they're forced to pay individual landlords sometimes tens of thousands of pounds just for them to agree to rent out their homes. It's a senseless waste of our public money. Manchester City Council spent the most on landlords' incentives, spending 3.3 million in 2024-2025, with Enfield Council in North London spending 2.7 million, Ealing Council in West London spending 2.3 million, and Birmingham City Council spending 1.7 million. Many of these local authorities are facing budget deficits and pushing through cuts to service and council tax hikes. Manchester City Council reportedly an £18 million budget gap earlier this year, while Birmingham City Council made the largest cuts in local authority history after declaring itself effectively bankrupt. And this is the same Birmingham City Council that still has issues with the bin strikes as well. The highest single one-off payment to a landlord, £15,385, was paid by Southwark Council in South London, with many other councillors frequently paying more than £10,000 to landlords. In 2018, only one council in London reportedly paid £10,000 or more in a single incentive payment, while 6 reportedly doing so in 2024-2025. Tommy described the rental market as like the Wild West, with landlords rigging the system in line to line their own pockets at the expense of people experiencing homelessness and the local council that are trying to house them. This is why I said, the last video I did about landlords, I said they're evil. This is why they're evil. Once again, this is why I call landlords vile people. Again, this is another example of it. He urged the government to unfreeze local housing allowance rates and give metro mayors the powers to limit rent increases to help curb the practice. So this is the top 5 councils for spending on incentive payments to landlords, from payments to private landlords in selected councils, the most there in Manchester City, the less there in Nottingham there. And that's, of course, from the Freedom of Information request that Generation Went had here. You can see there, £3.35 million for Manchester. Chris Norris, the policy director of the National Residential Landlords Association, said the incentive was a poor way of funding the housing system, but had come out of an enormous shortfall between local housing allowance rates in almost every area of the country and market rents. He said landlords were increasingly finding people who are reliant on local housing allowance or universal credit simply cannot afford to rent, and the incentives allow landlords to take on families who are likely to fall into rent arrears. Norris, who also said that incentives were offered to landlords to get them to take on tenants perceived to represent a higher risk, such as people with substance abuse issues or those who have come out of prison. Quote, frankly, it does a job, and it's probably the least bad option available to lots of local authorities at the moment, he said. It helps landlords cover their costs and to offer accommodation, but it would be far more efficient and equitable if the government actually ensured that there was a welfare system that allowed people access to homes in the first place. Yeah, and the problem is that the welfare system is near to next impossible to get onto. It's very, very difficult to get onto the welfare system. The campaigner said the system was open to abuse and landlords could pay councils off against each other on issue eviction notice in order to gain further payment. Grace Williams, the executive member for housing at Generation at London Council, said the capital was grappling with the most extreme homelessness emergency in the country, and boroughs were facing huge difficulties meeting their legal duty to find accommodation for homeless residents. Quote, rather than using expensive hotels and B&Bs, working with local landlords and in the private rented sector can secure better outcomes for homeless families and improve value for money, she said. Birmingham City Council said incentivised payments was a necessary and pragmatic response to the fact that more than 25,000 people in the city were on the housing register. Ealing Council said incentivised payments helped homeless households overcome barriers in accessing the rented sector, such as a lack of credit history, affordability or previous tenancy experience. The Manchester City Council spokesperson said the private rented sector was better value for money and more appropriate and secure than the alternative option of costly hotels and B&Bs, which were also unlawful except in exceptional circumstances and time limited to 6 weeks. Yeah, the problem is with temporary accommodation, obviously you have to move them after a certain point. That's a real hassle for the councils. Whereas from the council's point of view, I think the councils are looking at it from a point of view of, they're looking at it more from a point of view as work in times rather than cash here, in the situation of, the problem is when they put them in temporary accommodation, after a while they have to move them from somewhere. They have to move them, they have to shift them. And that's the same thing here where in hotels and B&Bs where they're limited to 6 weeks here. That obviously should change. I personally, like, if you found out, instead of asylum seekers in your hotels and you found out that they were actually homeless people, maybe you'd have a bit more sympathy towards instead. People will have people more sympathetic to them. I personally think it probably would be more cheaper to basically hire out an entire hotel or B&B instead of that. But I don't know. I don't know the calculations and the cost it would be for the council instead of paying all the landlords, because every council would be different. And plus, you only have there's only so much space in the hotels that you can fit them in, I suppose, as well. And yeah, you're getting them out of the cold. But here's the thing: like, what are we doing once you get them off the streets? What are we doing to make sure that we get them on their feet? Because this is it's not just about getting these people off the streets and into homes. It's about getting the next step, being able for them to be able to self-sustain themselves, to be able to earn a living, to be able to pay their own bills, to get to a point where they're not having to rely on universal credit, and that they can actually step on their own 2 feet and actually make a living for themselves. Well, the problem is that it's not possible for that to happen because of the way the system is. Homes cost too much, rent costs too much, and whether you are on universal credit or whether you are on even on the bare minimum wage, yeah, you're a single person, you're not going to be able to accommodate yourself. It's just not enough. Like the jobs, the low end of jobs, the pay is just not sufficient. And that gap between them being able, the minimum wage and being able to live within a bare minimum means, that gap needs to be tightened. It's far too wide. It needs to be a case of that if you're earning on the minimum wage, it should be enough for at least basic necessity needs. To have a home, to be able to feed yourself, to be able to clothe yourself, to be able to do basic necessity, to be able to have at least the basics. But we are so far away from that now. So I don't know how people going from homelessness end up being able to make it on their own. And that's even with people sharing. It's still even when people are sharing accommodation, it's still incredibly challenging for a lot of those people as well, because not everybody gets along with each other as well. So you have that on top of it. It's just very problematic right now, and the government aren't really tackling this issue. You know, all the talk of going on about immigration and asylum seekers. The cost of living crisis is one of the biggest problems, and we need to help people get on their feet. Stop ignoring homeless people. Stop ignoring people who aren't doing anything with themselves, and turn them into productive people in society. And by helping them get on their feet, helping them be able to pay their bills, helping them to be able to afford a home, helping them to be able to food and feed themselves, so they can actually be productive members of society, rather than just trying to get them out off the streets so people can't see them. It's not exactly fixing the problems, is it? It's almost like just sticking sticky plasters to it for the time being. But what do you guys honestly think? What do you guys make about English councils paying private landlords millions in incentives to house homeless families? Let me know your thoughts and more on this story down in the comment section below. Now, if you found this video interesting and informative, please hit that like button. It'd be greatly appreciated. Share it across social media. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Do check out Rumble and Patreon below for extra content on those platforms as well. And if you want to financially support me in the work that I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p. Click the join button down below on your screen. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.